The moment Lieutenant Colonel David Hale spoke my name from the podium, every conversation in that crowded banquet hall stopped dead. My sister's hand dropped mid-sentence. My mother's smile froze. My father, who had been boasting about my sister's accomplishments, suddenly looked like he'd swallowed glass. For the first time in 15 years, the family that had written me off as the quiet daughter was about to learn they didn't know me at all. I hadn't intended to attend my sister's celebration. My plan was simple: appear for an hour, drink one glass of wine, shake a few hands, and slip out before anyone asked too many questions. I should have known better. The event was held in a rented hall on the outskirts of the base, with folding chairs and a banner reading "Congratulations, Captain Reynolds" in gold lettering. My sister, Samantha, had just been promoted and topped her class in an advanced tactical training program. My parents were beaming, radiating a pride I'd rarely seen directed toward me. My father pulled guests aside to explain that Samantha had inherited the family's true military instinct, as if I wasn't standing a few feet away in my own uniform. My mother introduced me as my other daughter. She's also in the service. Those two words, "also in," summarized my place in the family hierarchy perfectly. I had stopped correcting these slights long ago. There comes a point when you run out of energy to explain yourself to people who've already made up their minds. I'd made peace with that exhaustion years before this party. Samantha entered like she owned the room. That night, she did. Friends and officers swarmed around her, asking about the course, the challenges, what it felt like to finish first. She answered every question with relish, describing every obstacle, every score, every moment that tested her limits. By her third glass of champagne, the stories had grown more dramatic with each retelling. Then someone mentioned the name. Is it true they still teach a course built around that legend, Obsidian? My spine stiffened. Nobody noticed. Nobody in that room, except one officer standing quietly at the back, had any reason to connect that name to me. Samantha laughed. Obsidian? They mentioned that name like it was supposed to make us sweat. She took another sip. Please, even Obsidian never scared me. The group erupted in laughter. I didn't laugh. I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip. Because Obsidian wasn't a legend to me. It was mine. A call sign given to me over a decade ago. Samantha glanced my way as she said it. She wanted me to hear it. She always wants me to hear it. There's a particular look my sister gets when she's scoring a point, a flicker at the corner of her mouth. I said nothing. I'd learned that silence was easier. But silence has an expiration date. Behind Samantha, a man in dress blues had gone still. Lieutenant Colonel David Hale, a senior evaluator I'd worked with years ago. He was no longer smiling. His gaze locked onto me like he'd seen a ghost. Samantha turned to follow his line of sight. Sir, she said, straightening automatically. Hale stepped past her, his eyes never leaving mine. Ma'am, he said, his voice carrying enough for those nearby to hear. I didn't know you'd be here tonight. Samantha's smile faltered. Hale straightened his shoulders and spoke the words that would unravel 15 years of silence. It's an honor to see you again, Obsidian. To understand why that sentence landed so hard, you have to understand growing up as Rachel Sullivan in a house where love felt measured on a scoreboard nobody admitted existed. I was born 7 years before my sister. I spent my early childhood as an only child, then suddenly became the older sibling of a baby determined to be seen. Samantha wasn't a bad kid. She was just a little girl who craved applause the way others crave air. In a house with 2 working parents, she learned that the loudest performance got the biggest reaction. I was the opposite. Quiet. Self-contained. The kid who did homework without being asked and didn't mention good grades unless specifically asked. My mother called me low maintenance, which sounds like a compliment until you realize it means nobody has to notice you. My father had served briefly before an injury ended his career. He seemed to be waiting for one of us to complete what he started. When I enlisted, he was proud. For a while, I was the daughter who would finish his legacy. Then my assignments shifted. I moved into roles I couldn't discuss at dinner. Not because I was being secretive, but because that's how certain work operates. You speak in careful generalities and let people fill in the blanks. When my father asked what I was doing, I'd say training exercises or evaluation assignments. I watched disappointment settle on his face. He wanted war stories and got shrugs instead. Samantha never had that problem. She shared everything. Every course, every score, every promotion, delivered in vivid detail. And because I stayed quiet while she stayed loud, my family drew a simple conclusion. Samantha was going somewhere. I was standing still. I didn't argue. Partly out of pride. Partly because I didn't think family dinners were the place to discuss classified work. And partly because some tired part of me had stopped believing it would change anything. What none of them knew was that years earlier, I'd been selected for a specialized program in reconnaissance, precision marksmanship, and instructor development. It wasn't dramatic. It was patience, discipline, hundreds of hours of learning to wait, to observe, to never act until certain. That's where the call sign came from. Obsidian. Not because of body counts. Because I worked quietly, almost invisibly, until the exact moment I needed to be seen. Instructors joked that you never knew Obsidian was in the room until it was too late. The name outlived my active role. Years later, some training frameworks I'd helped develop were still being used to test new officers. In certain circles, Obsidian had become a benchmark, a standard people were measured against without knowing whose standard it was. But at home, I was still just Rachel, who was also in the service. Which brings us back to that ballroom. Samantha spun to face me, her expression caught between confusion and dread. What did he just call you? I met her eyes. You heard him. Nobody moved. Then Samantha reached for a joke. Sir, you mean her? She laughed, gesturing at me like I was a punchline. This is my sister, Rachel. Hale's expression hardened. I know exactly who I mean, Captain. I watched officers exchange glances. They'd heard the name Obsidian spoken with reverence. They'd built an image of some untouchable figure and were now reconciling that with the woman in a modest black dress holding water. Hale didn't launch into a speech. He simply said I'd helped develop standards used in Samantha's course. Then he added the detail that did real damage. One of the evaluations that gave you the most trouble, the compromised approach scenario, was built off a methodology she developed. Color drained from my sister's face. Truth lands harder than any insult. My father broke the silence. Why didn't you ever tell us? I felt exhausted, not vindicated. When exactly would you have listened? He opened his mouth, then closed it. I could see him searching for a moment he'd have made space for an answer he decided he didn't need. I reminded him of the times I'd tried. The Thanksgiving I started explaining a new assignment, and my mother redirected to Samantha's fitness test. The way conversations in our house gravitated toward whatever Samantha was doing next. My mother's face went pale. Let Samantha have this, she'd said once. She's finally doing something exceptional. Samantha pushed back. So I have a call sign I didn't know about. That doesn't erase what I did. I still finished first. You did, I said. And you should be proud. That caught her off guard. She'd braced for a fight and got grace instead. Hale spoke again. Captain, being good was never the problem. Thinking you had nothing left to learn, that's the problem. Then he revealed more. Did you tell everyone what actually happened during your final evaluation? Samantha's face changed. Not embarrassment, fear. During her final evaluation, there was a simulated compromised approach scenario. Her spotter flagged a discrepancy. She trusted her own read over the correction. In a live situation, that decision would have had consequences. In the simulation, it meant a failed objective. Nobody was hurt, but it went in her file. She told us the instructor was just being hard on her, my mother said. Hale answered gently. Nobody disliked your daughter. Her scores were some of the highest we'd seen. That's exactly why the judgment call mattered. We don't worry about mediocre shooters ignoring a spotter. We worry about brilliant ones who've never doubted themselves. He continued. She passed. But the board attached a mentorship requirement. Someone senior with comparable experience. I felt it before he said it. The name attached, Hale said, looking at me, was Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Sullivan. Samantha's head snapped toward me. She hadn't known. The file only listed rank and last name. I hadn't planned on telling her tonight. I'd intended to let the mentorship unfold professionally, quietly. But some truths don't wait for convenient timing. You knew, my father said. And you didn't say anything? I looked at Samantha. I asked the board to give her room to correct it. I told them she had the talent to be excellent if someone pushed her to actually listen instead of just perform. My father's face shifted to disbelief. You did that for her? After everything? She's my sister, I said. Something cracked behind Samantha's eyes. Not gratitude, something rarer. Because gratitude requires admitting you needed help. And my sister had spent 3 decades building an identity around never needing anyone's help. You always wanted to be better than me, she said. I looked at her. No, Samantha. You needed me to be worse than you. That landed in a way nothing else had. I wasn't talking about what we'd done. I was talking about who we'd let ourselves become to each other. Guests drifted away. My father found me by the window. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't accept it easily. It was never about you being proud of Samantha. You were supposed to be proud of her. The problem was that the only way you knew how to be proud of one daughter was by making the other one smaller. He didn't argue. He just let it land. I told him about the Miss ceremonies. The Thanksgiving when Samantha told the table, I just wore the uniform to look important. Not one person defended me. I remember that Thanksgiving, he said. I know you do. You just didn't say anything. I convinced myself you didn't need the attention, he said. You never ask. I stopped asking. That's different from not wanting it. Samantha crossed the room. I could tell she wanted to apologize but didn't know how. She'd never learned to apologize without defending herself. I understood this wasn't entirely her fault. You learn what you're shown. I didn't push her. If it was going to mean something, it needed time. I picked up my coat. Samantha caught my arm. Are you still going to mentor me? I stopped. That depends on whether you want a mentor or an audience. I walked out into the cold air and didn't look back. 3 days later, she appeared in my office. I want to know what I did wrong. We went through her file together. I asked about the compromised approach. I thought I was right, she admitted. I was so sure I didn't think his correction was worth checking. Were you right? No. The problem isn't that you were wrong. It's that you didn't leave room for the possibility you might be. I told her something I'd never said out loud. The moment you believe your reputation will save you is the moment it becomes dangerous. She asked if I was ever scared. Constantly, I said. Fear isn't weakness. It's information. It tells you something matters. Arrogance is what happens when you stop listening. Over the following weeks, she changed. She started listening to her spotters. She admitted mistakes. She stopped needing me to be smaller so she could feel larger. When her reevaluation came, I signed it. Recommended. A year passed. Another promotion ceremony. This time different. Less performance in the air. My parents sat differently, less like an audience, more like people who understood what they were witnessing. Samantha gave a speech. A year ago, I thought being the best meant making sure everybody knew it. Then somebody taught me that people who are actually good rarely need to announce it. She paused, found me in the back. My sister taught me that. Not Lieutenant Colonel Sullivan. Not some legend. Just my sister. Afterward, my father found me. I should have asked more about your life instead of assuming I already understood it. I accepted that. Not pretending the past didn't happen, but deciding what kind of relationship to build going forward with my eyes open. Later, Samantha asked, that night at my party when I said Obsidian never scared me, what were you going to say before Hale showed up? Nothing. She laughed. Seriously? Why? I looked at my sister, the woman she'd become. Someone who'd learned to sit with being wrong instead of performing being right. Because if you have to tell people who you are, eventually you're going to meet someone who already knows. She was quiet, then laughed softly. Something in that laugh told me we'd finally arrived somewhere neither of us had known how to find on our own. I used to think that night was when my family discovered who I was. I was wrong. They didn't need to know who Obsidian was. They needed to learn how to see Rachel. And I finally learned I never had to make myself smaller just to help the people I love feel bigger. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear where it found you. Drop a comment below. We share stories like this every day at Zarabell Stories, so subscribe if you don't want to miss the next one. I promise there's more where this came from.